Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today is part 2 of my rain jacket, and I am super excited to actually share the result of this project with you guys because I am so in love with it, and it's literally my go-to jacket at the moment because the weather is just like sunny but cold and windy, and then maybe it rains, but you'll never know because the forecast is just very unstable and unreliable. But anyways, I am super pumped to show you the results today, and we're gonna jump right into it. Before that though, I just quickly wanted to tell you guys, look at my cute top that I have on. This is actually my scrap top Talia that is from my collection, which will only be available until the end of September, so it's literally only 4 days, 5 days, something like that from the moment this video goes online. And these tops are super cute and unique to the wearer, so these are one of a kind because they are scrap tops. And I am using all of my scrap material from other projects, and this is reducing waste, and nobody else is gonna have this top. So this is a really cool thing. Go check it out. Links are in the description below. Also, the rest of my collection, there are a few pieces still available, will also never ever be available after the end of September. So go ahead and check out the rest. I do, of course, understand if you can't afford something like this, or you just do not want to spend that much money on clothing, which is totally fine. There are plenty of other ways to support me and my channel. For example, just go and hit that subscribe button and the like button, or leave a comment if you feel very supportive today. I'd highly appreciate any of these things very much. But enough of that, let's roll the video. So in part 1 we already finished the complete jacket apart from the lining, and the lining is what this video is dedicated to. So I am grabbing my front lining and then also my facings of my front pieces. There is an easier option though, because this is going to leave you with a corner for when the side lining pieces will be attached. I am describing that other option in my sewing instructions for the listing of this pattern because I only came across it after I was done with this. Sorry about this. Here though, I am sewing my facings onto my front pieces first, and the most important thing about the facings is that you have to ease the lining fabric into the facing from that notch until the end of the hem basically. So you see this point right here, and this is gonna leave you with an overhang in the hem, and this point that you can see on screen right here that I am marking with a pin, because you're gonna have to have some overhang. Every jacket has that because it prevents the lining from tucking on the outer fabric, and this leaves you with a nicer fit. So this is very important pretty much. This is what it ends up looking, and as you can see there is this 2 centimeter overhang right there, which I was talking about, but also this corner up here, and we're actually going to do the same thing for the back piece as well. Now for the back piece there's a little bit of preparation that we have to do, which is the back fold. So in the center back, every lining in jackets and coats has a fold around 3 centimeters, so 1.5 centimeters folded in half, and that's held in place by a top stitch coming from the upper and lower corner, so from the neck and from the hem. And as you can see right here, it is this very rounded curve, and then it goes just straight down into either hem or neck. If you decide to buy this pattern, by the way, everything is of course marked in the pattern, so you don't have to memorize any of this. And once you unfold it and iron it, you can see that it fixes the fold into place. And yes, I do iron a lot in my projects, and you give me a lot of comments about how much I iron and that I'm ironing my life away and stuff like that. In a nice way, obviously, and I understand it in a nice way, so don't worry about that. I'm very much amused, by the way, by these comments. But it is true though, if you iron, your project will end up being better if you iron step by step, believe me. But anyways, I am now putting the center back of my back facing together, because we're gonna put that right sides together onto the back piece, the back lining piece next. And it's honestly the same thing that I did for the front pieces. You also have to ease in the lining into the hem as well for the fold that I was talking about before, and just match up all the notches, all the points like center back and stuff like that, and you should be fine. Once done with back and front lining pieces, we put the facings of both of them together, and there is a notch approximately 10 centimeters below the corner of the facings that indicates your slit or your hip line, but we're gonna put a slit there. So just put both pieces right sides together and sew from this notch towards the edge of the facing, or the other way around. You need to cut towards the seam allowance there as well. I'm doing that, I think, afterwards, but you need to do that right at the notch, so in order for the seam allowances to, lay flat and nice. Now grab your side lining pieces and put those right sides together with this corner of the facings that we just put together. And this is not too difficult, but also, not the easiest. But basically what you have to do is just to match up both of the patterns and just sew with the facing up, because you see the seam that you stitched earlier, and you can match up the corners for the corner of the lining pieces perfectly if you put the stitching upwards. Just a small tip. Once you're done with that, you rotate the side lining pieces so that the seam just matches up with the front and the back dividing seams as well. And this is what it should come out as. Once done with ironing everything flat and nice, we'll take the sleeve pieces. It's pretty straightforward, except for that we already have a complete side seam in the lining that we previously sewed, because we have a side lining piece, so actually there is no side seam. But we have a side seam in the sleeves. So in order to put both of them together, sleeve and corpus, we have to close the side seam of the sleeves, but leave the shoulder seams open because they're still open in the corpus. So once we're done with that, we can just simply put the sleeve pieces onto the corpus by aligning all of the notches, also the side seam notch with the side seam of the sleeves, and then also, of course, the neck edges, and just sew along this seam. After that, we are going to tackle the shoulder seam. Now, the shoulder seam goes from neck to hem of the sleeve, so all the way through, because we made a raglan sleeve. One of the two sleeves you're going to sew closed completely, but the other one you're actually going to sew around like 10 centimeters back tack, and then leave a around 20 centimeters wide gap open and just finish the end towards the hem, as you can see right here, because this is what we're going to use to turn the whole jacket over once we're done with sewing. So this is a very, very important step. We still have the sleeve hem facing, which you can see right here, which we are going to tackle next. Now, we already finished the sleeves basically, so what we have to do is also close the side seams of our facings, and then we can attach the facings onto the hem of our lining sleeves. As usual, I am ironing in between steps. I am ironing the seam allowances mostly open, just for them to lay flat and nice, and they're not going to bulk up or anything. And then I'm just aligning the facing pieces with my lining sleeves and stitch them right sides together. Now, of course, we also have a hood for our lining. That's exactly the same as how we did it for the outer pieces. So I'm skipping the sewing right here and skip just to the finished piece. Now, before we can attach the hood to the lining though, there is the front facing still that we have to finish. First thing is to close the center back. I'm ironing that seam open as well. And then we can attach the hood to the neckline of our front facing. This is pretty straightforward. The two small curves go together. We're just aligning all of the notches and all of the edges, of course, stitch along this. And I also, just exactly as I did it with the outer hood, I'm also top stitching the seam with the seam allowance facing inside the hood. You might also have to cut into the seam like you did for the outer, just for it to ease nicer into the curve that you have for the neck. And after all of that, we can finally attach the facing with the hood attached to it to the lining. That's just one whole seam. So you're going to want to align all of the notches again as usual from facing and lining, and then of course also the hem, and you're just going to stitch through it all the way. And here we go, our lining is complete and it looks really, really nice. I personally really like the contrast between the lining and the facing fabric, and then of course also the contrast between those two and the outer fabric. To me it looks very, very luxurious. I don't know why, maybe because it reminds me of Burberry or something. Anyways, this is what it looks like. I give it a final press. The last seam that we stitched of course also has to be ironed for everything to look nicer. And this is what it ended up looking, and now it's finally time to attach the outer shell to the lining itself. And I'm putting right sides together and start my way down. Basically, I'm starting at the hood. I'm aligning the front corner where the button tape is located with the facing, but I'm making sure that my stitching lines actually match up, because we already put the button tape onto the outer shell. You have to move it kind of 1 centimeter inward so that the stitching lines match up. If you follow the notches down, it's going to naturally be at this location, but just for you not to wonder if this is correct or not, it is. Once everything is pinned into place, I go ahead and stitch everything together. I turned the hood over just to make sure that everything lays correctly, but you need to turn it wrong sides out anyways again, so I don't know why I did that. But anyways, you're going to want to find the seam allowance of your button tape and your front piece, because this is where we're going to attach the front facing to as well. Now there's going to be some notches that will match up with the button tape as well, like for example the hood seam right there, or also the waist seam, bust seam, hip seam, stuff like that, you know. And of course also the hem. Now from the hem we are going to start stitching all around the whole jacket. So we're also going to stitch around the curves, and then we're also going to make the slits really nicely. So be careful with that, but we're going to come to that in just a second. For now, just work your way down with the pins to the hem edge right there. Once you reach that, you have to make sure that the button tape, which is on the inside right now, is out of the way so that you won't stitch onto it when you're stitching around the jacket. Find the slits on both the outer and the facing and cut towards the seam right there in order for being able to sew over it. Once you're done that, we can go ahead and pin both of them right sides together again until we reach the slit. Now the slit basically just needs to be stretched into one line, and then we can just simply stitch over it and close the slit. And this is going to make it lay really, really nicely. You're going to see that once I'm actually sewing this in just a second. For now, just pin all of the fabrics together, matching up all the notches as usual from one side over to the other side. And you're going to find that you'll end up at the other button tape and then also at the hood seam that we previously stitched. So while I'm sewing, I'm approaching the slit, and as you can see, I'm kind of like stretching out the fabric so that it builds one line, and I'm kind of bar tacking over the slit as well. And this is going to make it really, really nicely once it's turned inside out. But you always have to make sure that you're not stitching over any folds whatsoever. You just want to have the slit next to each other, as you can see right here, and then you just want to go straight over it, bar tack, and continue stitching without stitching into any folds whatsoever. So once done with that, the hardest part is over. Now we're gonna want to find the open shoulder seam in one of the sleeves and turn the whole piece inside out so that we can see what we did and appreciate that we managed to sew all of this in one go, which is really, really awesome, to be honest. This is what it should end up looking, and it's so, so cool already. I love how it looks. The next step, of course, who guessed it, is ironing. Now for this, we want to iron the ditch of the seam all around the jacket towards the facing as usual, so that we're not going to look into the ditch from the outside. Once done with ironing, I actually realized that I wanted to put an elastic in the hood. Now we are still able to do that because we still have the shoulder seam open. So we can reach the inside and actually place a grommet only on the outer shell of our hood. If you can, do that earlier. I am saying that in the sewing instructions as well. Since I marked all of the spots where these things go, you can go ahead and do that early on already, so that you are not going to have any of the struggles that I have placing the grommets inside. I still managed somehow, as I said though, do it early on so that you're not going to have all of the struggles that I have. I can now go ahead and feed the elastic through the hood on the inside, out the other grommet. And you need to do that now because the next step will be stitching the tunnel in place, so like top stitching next to the elastic, around 2.5 centimeters or 2 centimeters, I'm not sure what I did. To prevent the elastic from coming out, I am putting my stoppers in already, just as a placeholder. I don't know how long I want the elastic yet, I don't know where I want the stoppers to be placed, but just in case, so that nothing, comes out of there once I'm done with the tunnel. That would be bad because I would not be able to reach inside it anymore. And placing the hood with the right side facing up, very important. Always look onto the side that you are seeing on the outside as well. And I'm top stitching at around 2.5 centimeters. Then I also decided that I wanted a top stitch very closely to the edge of the hood as well. While I'm already at it, I can go ahead and top stitch everything else as well. I am top stitching my button tapes at around 5mm, so that is my press foot width right there. And then at the hem, I decided on a top stitch of 3.5cm. You can do 4cm, you can do 2, whatever you want actually. And I'm doing it all around the hem. Now once I'm reaching the slit, I'm using my hand measuring tape right there to measure how far I have to stitch into the piece. So I'm measuring 3.5cm inwards, then turn 90 degrees and go straight over the seam right there, and then go down at 3.5cm distance from the hem as well. I'm doing exactly the same for the other side, of course, and then once I'm reaching the button tape of the other side, I'm also doing a 5mm top stitch as well. One of the last things that we have to sew actually is the hem of our sleeves. I am grabbing both of the layers and turn it inside out so that I have my lining facing outwards. Now I can go in from the opening of my sleeve and reach towards the side seam that both of the layers have. And I can go ahead and grab both of them at the same time and turn them through the whole of my upper sleeve seam outwards. This way I can stitch them together without anything twisting, and also keep in mind that we are working on the inside, still being able to turn everything inside out again. I found it's the easiest to just match up the side seams of both of the sleeves and then just match the notches on the facing with the sleeve seams as well. And this way you can go all around the hem of the sleeve and just put pins in order to be able to stitch correctly. Once I'm done with the stitching, I can go ahead and also top stitch at 4 or 3.5 or whatever you did for the hem as well. It's easiest if you also iron this. I was just very impatient and didn't iron it. It didn't turn out that great. So go ahead and iron before you do this and then top stitch. And since we're done with all of the sewing right now, we can go ahead and close the opening that is still there in the shoulder seam. What you want to do there, you can either do this by hand or machine, you want to fold the seam allowances of both of the sides towards the inside and then just put pins in to keep it there. You can also iron it to keep it in place, whatever works best for you. And then you just want to top stitch very closely to the edge. And you can do this because nobody's going to see it. That's why we put the hole at the shoulder seam of the lining, because it's going to be invisible. Last thing that we have to do is put the snap buttons in the button tape. What you can see me do right here is actually just doing the math for the distance between the snap buttons. I put 10, I think, in, and then another one at the hood part of the button tape, which meant that I had to have a distance of 9.35 centimeters. And then you just want to, hammer in your snap buttons, which, by the way, work differently from snap button to snap button, so I'm not going to include a tutorial of how my specific ones work. But you're going to come out with a full row of snap buttons on your button tape, and they look really cool. I also love the gold that I chose. So this is what it looks like, and I'm super happy with the outcome. And that's it for today's video, and that's it for the actual project. So the coat is done. I am super excited to share the results with you, and I'm super excited to finally release the photos that we took of this coat. I will share them, of course, on my Instagram if you aren't following me there yet. What are you waiting for? I am showing so much behind the scenes, like in stories and stuff like that. And of course, I am sharing all of my photos and videos that I do for all of my projects that you might be interested to, as well as other stuff, the usual daily life of me, my work, and of course my cat. So if you're interested in that, go follow me. Down in the description there is the direct link, or My handle is just exactly the same as here on my YouTube as it is on all of my socials. So I would highly appreciate if you do that. Also, if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell to get notified whenever I post. I post on Sundays, so you can keep an eye out for that. If you haven't already, check out my videos on my channel. There are plenty of videos about sewing, designing, and of course pattern construction, which is a big topic here on my channel, which not a lot of people do, honestly. A step-by-step tutorial on any clothing that you might want to construct. You're right here. So go ahead and click the subscribe button now. I would highly appreciate it and you support my work with that. Yeah, and with that all out of the way, thank you so much again for watching, and we're gonna see each other next Sunday. Bye guys!